You're listening to the Swap Society podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Robertson. I interview thought leaders and change makers who are working to create a more sustainable and equitable world through fashion, art, and activism. Join us for a dose of climate optimism as we envision a brighter future. Hey everyone, welcome to the Swap Society podcast. Today I'm talking with Christy Lin. Christy is a creator, a fashion industry veteran, and a podcast host. Christy, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your background. We met through through a women's founders group, and you actually had me on a podcast that you used to host called Afternoon Equalitea.
Yeah.
And that's how we met. And then we did some swapping. But but you actually worked for a very long time in the fashion industry. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into fashion.
Yeah, I actually still dabble in the fashion industry. I freelance, so I'm not really tied to like any specific company right now. I kind of got into fashion. Well, I went to design school. So like I got into fashion because it was kind of one of the only things that creatively made sense to me. Like I loved fabric and kind of like the tactile nature of fashion design versus like other fine arts sort of fields. I actually, I've always kind of been like a creative person. My dad used to paint and things like that. So I've always really been exposed to creative things, to art, to pretty pictures and things like that. But fabric, like really to me felt very like home. And so I got into fashion design. I actually moved to LA from Northern Nevada to attend fashion school. And then when I left fashion school and then I went into the industry, instead of going into design, I started doing product development, which for me was a whole other world because like, instead of just designing and like drawing and putting the things up, like I actually got to be on the ground and I got to go to factories and I got to shop for fabric and go to trade shows and kind of get my hands in a lot more parts of the industry than I would have as just a designer. Mm-hmm. And so that's really how I ended up kind of working in the sustainable side of things. One of the brands I worked for, they were developing a sustainable line. And unbeknownst to me, that would become my baby of that company. And so, I really got into researching sustainable fabrics. How do we source better factories? How do we treat factories better? Kind of like the whole relationship between the industry and the production of it, because it's something that a lot of people don't know. And so that kind of became like my purpose for a long time, is how to make that relationship better. And, a lot of it, there's so many pieces to it, from like, what designers can do better, like how do they make better choices, like when they're designing and developing and, just concepting what they're putting out there. And then also just the practice of how we consume fashion and how we buy and we swap, or how do we do things in a better way, because the fashion industry, I'm sure you've talked about this a lot, like is one of the most damaging producers, one of the most damaging industries we have. And it's just, again, like it's so hard because like kind of both parties are guilty of it, like both on the consumer side and on the development side of it. So yeah. And that's really just what my work has become.
What were some of the kind of eye-opening moments for you when you started to realize the myriad problems in the fashion industry?
So when I started attending trade shows, there was actually a trade show that happened in LA. It only happened once, and I wish they brought it back, but I know it was a huge feat. It was called Remode.
I was there.
Yeah. And there was so many talks and there were so many just statistics being thrown around. And I think like it really sort of like drove the nail down for me that like, this is something that there are a lot of people that are trying to work on this. And it's just like, how do we get everyone else to see it? Mm-hmm. And, all the statistics being around about like how 1 in 6 people in the world is employed in the fashion industry in one way or another, whether that's by working in the fields picking cotton, for the cotton producers or even like retail workers. Like 1 in 6 people on the entire planet has some hand in the fashion industry. And so like just the reach of what the fashion industry is and what it can do is just monumental. Like I like just I don't think anyone actually realizes it. And I think that statistic to me has always really stuck out because again, just like it really demonstrates how massive the industry is.
That is such an insane statistic to think about because especially I guess as much as I love fashion and you obviously also love
Yeah.
fashion, right? We love nice design and pretty things and I'm wearing this, very soft cashmere sweater and like I'm really appreciating it on this like gray, kind of
Yeah.
gray day. But we've taken it too far, right?
Yeah.
You've mentioned, there's definitely this relationship between overconsumption, overproduction, and everything in the middle. But we obviously don't need this much clothing. And I think that is kind of the essence of part of the problem, right? It's this
Yeah.
1 in 6 people on the planet work in the fashion industry.
Mm-hmm.
Is the fashion industry really one of the most important things, going on planet Earth right now?
Yeah. Well, and that's not to say that anyone is like bad for wanting to be fashionable or wanting to buy fashion or wanting to, be trendy or to, again, like I love fashion, you love fashion. Like fashion is a thing that you can love, but like still understand that there are parts that could be better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like, that those conversations are really important to have.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that it also points to that kind of that overproduction and that overconsumption kind of
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely.
dynamic.
Yeah, like when you think about fast fashion, because I know like I've talked to people who like I have a friend who is also a model, like she's a fit model, she's a runway model, and like, but she, same thing. Like when she was growing up, like one of her first jobs was at Forever 21, and she told me about like going back into like the back room and just having like walls of boxes of clothing that they never opened, that they had to just like send away because it was out of season. Like so it I think fast fashion is really like it always gets brought up because of practices like that where they produce so much and then it just doesn't really go anywhere. And then you have to ask yourself, what's the point?
Yeah. Well, and then it winds up in a landfill or,
Mm-hmm.
in Ghana or Chile or, in these
Yeah.
kind of clothing dumping grounds where
Yeah.
they're not just finding clothes that people have worn and then they're not wearable anymore. They're finding tags on the clothes, like
Yeah, they're
new with
brand
tag.
new. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. No, and the thing is, like, I remember watching this documentary about I think they were in Ghana and they were like you called it a dumping ground and it really is because we send all of our all of our overstock over there, or not all of it, but like a portion of it we send over there, and a lot of it still ends up in landfills in those countries. Like they're not even getting sold or traded or anything when we send it away. They're still ending up in landfills. So we're just essentially creating more and more landfills. Like we're not really like, yeah. And so, the conversation really becomes about how do we produce with better intent, I guess, and how do we create more intentionally? Because like we mentioned, like we love fashion and there's nothing wrong with like loving fashion and wanting to buy trendy things and buy things that feel nice. But like, how do we do that with more intent? And I think it's like, it kind of goes both ways where it's like, how do we buy with more intent and how do we create with more intent?
So from your perspective, obviously, you've worked in the fashion industry for a long time and you know more about the fashion industry than the average person. What are the things that brands can do to actually be more sustainable and not just greenwashing, right? But
Yeah.
actually employ, sustainability practices and better ethics that are meaningful.
That's a really big question. It's a very loaded question. Because what I've learned is like, because I've worked for both fast fashion and for, more like mid-luxury brands. And the practices are similar, but they're also different but also like, they're similar in the way that, profits still have to be made, margins have to be made. And so it's really hard to bring up. And this was the struggle that I had when I was working full time in the industry. It was like, how do we propose and how do we put in sustainable practices while still maintaining profits and margins and all these things that make you successful in like, a capitalist society. And so that's why I said it's a very loaded question, because like there isn't really like a good answer, because it involves overhauling how everyone does everything. And so it's quite a feat. But what I have seen is like, there are a lot of emerging brands, a lot of these like indie designers that are really putting like people before profit. They're really like, they're making capsule collections. They're really designing with the intent that their pieces go for more than a season. And the people that, the hands that are behind it are well compensated, that they're treated fairly, that the factories are local, like, so you're not shipping things from a bunch of different places, or if they are, like, those factories have protocols in place to make sure that everyone is treated fairly and everything is being done in a manner that keeps everyone healthy and keeps everything kind of above the line. And so there are things that we can do as developers and as designers. But it does involve research, and it involves investment up front, which I know a lot of established companies aren't able to do that. And so then that conversation turns into like, well, how can we integrate those things?
Do you think, though, because at least it seems from my perspective, and granted, I might live in a little bit of a bubble, but I also read WWD and pay attention to the news, and I feel, even this morning I saw a Wall Street Journal article about luxury brands, which ones are embracing secondhand and which ones are not, and that there's this great divide kind of happening in the fashion industry. It does seem like more and more brands realize that they need to do something, right? That things need to change. As someone who's kind of, in the industry, what's your take on it from the inside?
I think a lot of this is driven by the consumer as well. Like, so the more information that gets out there, the more that people are kind of waking up to the practices and waking up to how they can do better, like how just even in like individually, like how we buy and produce. So like me personally, like I generally only buy either from sample sales, or I swap through something like Swap Society. Like I do that because like me personally, like I understand how I consume, and how I do like a closet clean out and things like that. So like I've really taken it upon myself to find out how to do that, and that all that when like those practices always get back to the brands, and they start understanding, and they understand like their things need to be not just sustainable, but they a lot of these luxury brands are understanding that the longevity of their items is also value. And so I think like that's what those practices are becoming, is it has to do with like the quality versus the quantity.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like there would definitely, the fashion industry is largely driven by quantity. Like you have to sell as much as you can. That's fast fashion. That's what fast fashion is.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that the practices are kind of being reversed, and people are starting to awaken to the idea of like quality and having things that last a long time, or that are able to become secondhand and still have like a lot of life left in them. The brands themselves are also starting to understand that. And then that's when those practices, and that's when that shift happens.
It is really interesting for me to see which brands are kind of embracing the idea of a garment having multiple owners, for example, and wanting to participate in that and be a part of that. maybe even having their own take back, versus the companies that are saying, no way.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting because, to your point, I do think that, going forward for these brands, they do need to focus on those, the longevity piece, right? Like, we make our items so well, they're going to last you. You're going to have this for years. You're going to pass this on to, someone in your family, or you're going to resell it or something that, I don't know, from my perspective, I feel like that's alluring to me. I don't really buy brand new things, but on the rare occasion that I do, I think about that.
Yeah.
Can I use this for a really long time? Is it well made? Is it, and then I will spend more for that.
Mm-hmm.
But you did mention, margins, and obviously, that's one of the hardest parts for any fashion business, even resale, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, if we can start to shift that consumer consciousness more into this buy less, choose well, make it last kind of philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
Everyone will start to line up. Do you think that there's a future? Do you think that there's a future for fast fashion, or do you think that it will kind of start to disappear?
I think, how do I answer this? Like, fast fashion to me isn't inherently wrong. It's more the practice of the overproduction that causes the issue. Because like I think like this kind of goes into like, we're going to start an economics podcast right now. This goes into like scalability, and that's a lot of times what margins and profits are, is like, how do we scale, how do we make this bigger? And a lot of that is what ends up happening, is like you try to make things bigger, and so like when your profits are going up, then you have to scale up and you have to produce more in order to meet the demand that you believe is there. And so I'm not an economist, so I don't know what the right answer to that is, like, because scalability is also success. And so like fast fashion to me isn't inherently bad. It's the idea that like fast fashion needs to get bigger and bigger, like that's where the issue kind of comes in, and that's what creates the problem, is then we start growing, you kind of you're too big for your britches at that point, right? Like you end up becoming too big for what you can actually do, like what you can actually consume, and that really becomes the problem. And then and in that sense, like that, I think that's what a lot of people aren't realizing, is like when you produce that much and then and it ends up not going anywhere, then that isn't profit, then that's a loss.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, it's really trying to figure out what that balance is. And we talked about the longevity of items and things like that. I think like producing better quality, and just like understanding, being really sort of like in tune with just the consumption practices of like the people who are buying your items is really important. And like, and so having, it's, you kind of have to have your eye on the number, but also having your eye on like the people and the profit kind of go hand in hand.
And just to kind of go back, I know you said that you don't think that like fast fashion is in and of itself bad. Which part of that, because that could get some criticisms, that statement. So if you could just explain what part, like exactly what you mean by that. I mean, obviously like the business model of endless growth doesn't work, right? And it triggers this concept of degrowth. If you're listening and you haven't read Less is More, How Degrowth Will Save the Planet by Jason Hickel, I highly recommend it. It actually, he's an environmental economist, and so he really breaks down the economy side of things really well in a digestible way. Like, I promise it won't make you fall asleep. It's really engaging. But anyhow, so yeah, if you could just speak to what you mean by like what part of fast fashion do you think is not bad, I guess?
So fast fashion to me offers an accessibility point to a lot of people to trendy things.
Mm.
Because like, you know, we have to remember with fashion comes a lot of luxury, and like not everyone is going to be able to afford that Fendi bag, that, you know, that Prada jacket, that Balenciaga sweater, like those sorts of things. And so what fast fashion really answered, like to me, is the accessibility question. And so that's why I say that fast fashion isn't necessarily bad, because it provides a window of accessibility to trend, to things that, you know, make people feel pretty, that make people feel included, that make people feel like they can partake in fashion without having to have multi-million dollar fortunes. They don't have to have like, you know, the big family money bank or whatever. Like they can go into something like Forever 21, something like H&M, and feel pretty and buy things that are, you know, that they see in magazines, that they see on the runways, things like that. And so I really feel like fast fashion in and of itself, for that reason, is not inherently bad. But again, like it's the practice of the overproduction that kind of, it's like you can't have too much of a good thing.
Sure. So yeah, so the part that you like is this accessibility of stylish clothing for people that don't have that socioeconomic status that allow them to buy these luxury brands, which is most people on the earth, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, absolutely, you know, between the business practices and the overproduction and the, you know, the sustainability issues, it's obviously created a big problem. It's kind of like, yeah, it went too far.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, maybe started out okay, and then just over time has just gone beyond. And this book that I mentioned talks about that too, where we can't have endless growth on a finite planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's just the way that it is, and fashion is so polluting.
Yep.
From every stage of the process, from however the material is extracted, whether you're using land that could be used for food to grow cotton, and
Mm-hmm.
water that could be used to, you know, grow food, or
Right.
for people to drink to grow clothes, or you're extracting petroleum, you know, oil, and, you know, that's a whole other environmental issue. And then just every step of the way, so many emissions.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. No, and like, and the thing is, like, you know, that's those are the problems that overproduction has created. Like we wouldn't need as much cotton as we produce if we didn't, if there wasn't an inherent like consummation of it. Like if we didn't like, if companies didn't believe that there was that much demand, there would be no need to have these like cut corners of like mass produced cotton, mass produced polyester, things like that. And so again, like that's kind of, this is where like the practice of like finding, like balancing the scales of what consumers demand, or like what we believe consumers demand versus what we're developing, like that's kind of where those conversations need to happen. But again, like, you know, that goes to scalability. Like how do we scale things? Like how do we grow a business without growing? Is kind of like,
Right.
that's the conundrum, right?
I don't have the answer, by the way. And
Yeah,
I
no,
know
like I don't think there really is one. Like that's just like, that's kind of, but like, you know, that's the crux of all of it, is like we, you know, we as creators, we as developers, like it kind of, I know for me, like for a long time, like again, like I still freelance in the fashion industry, so I'm still producing technically. And it's hard sometimes to kind of navigate that dichotomy of like not wanting to add to the industry that I believe is also damaging it. And so, you know, how do I do that in a conscious way,
Mhm.
as a developer? And then like as a consumer, like how do I consume in a conscious way?
So I know you've talked about how you're a developer, and, you know, there are also designers. And for people that aren't as familiar with exactly how, you know, what all of the different roles are, if you could just do just like a very short, quick summary of kind of like, yeah, how, you know, like somebody made this sweater, right? It's from the swap. And for the record, it has like a huge hole in it. So I actually pulled this out of the reject pile. It is not, it was not even suitable for the swap, but I
mean, honestly, like, yeah, if you don't tell anyone, no one will ever know. So
of course I'm like, look at my giant hole. But someday I'll do a visible mend when I have like a few minutes to fix it. But yeah, I'm notorious for wearing stuff out of the reject bin, especially if
same. I do the same thing. Like look at this. It's all like, it's all just coming apart at the edges. Like, but it's comfortable. There's like an oil stain on somewhere too. Like, I don't know. I told you, I mostly get like samples. Like the samples are usually like, samples can't be sold. So that's usually like, that's where I get a lot of my wardrobe, honestly, is like sample sales and just like swapping. So
well, and I think though too, and and obviously like I'm announcing it like, oh, look at my holy sweater, but yeah, like I scrunched up the sleeve, nobody can really see it. I mean, you don't, but I don't think your message or my message is like, oh, everyone should walk around wearing stained holy clothes, because like that's not the message either. But I think that if we did a little bit more of that, I feel like people are so quick to just get rid of something with any little imperfection, and we've gotten away from mending our clothes and just caring for them and keeping them around longer. But I asked you a question, sorry, another tangent. But okay, so, and I think this is like J. Crew. Oh yeah, that is. Okay. So J. Crew, they obviously make a lot of sweaters. I don't know if you've ever worked with J. Crew, but let's say for someone who is unfamiliar, like how did this come to be sold, basically, like in a quick way?
Like from the very beginning of the process?
Yeah, just kind of like what the different roles are, like, right? Like for somebody that just doesn't really even think about how much it takes to even just sell one garment and make it.
So like, every company is a little bit different, but for the most part, there's always going to be like a designer or design team. And they're the ones who are picking, they're either picking or they're sketching out, or they're determining like, what silhouettes, and that's kind of like just the basic shape of whatever they're wanting to put out there is. And then there's usually some sort of development team that kind of helps to source, and they help to sort of like get everything, like all the pieces put together, and they're the ones who will coordinate between like the factory, the technical team, the logistics, the inspectors, like they're the ones who will take care of that. And then I mentioned the technical team, they're the ones that actually will do like the sizing. They determine like they fit the garments. They're the ones that draw up the patterns or create like the sizes and things like that. And then on the factory side of things, if the factory isn't within the company itself, which a lot of times it's no longer the case really to have an internal factory. Most of them are outsourced in one way or another. But on the factory side, you'll have the people that provide the raw materials. So like the raw cotton, they're like, those sorts of things. They provide the yarns. And the factory essentially like gets all those things put together, the fabric put together, or, the mills or whatever. And then they put the garment together. And then there's usually like, there's a whole fitting process that happens. So most garments, even like sweaters like that, like that's the sweater you're wearing probably was created years ago, and they just recycled the same shape over and over into different colors and different like yarns and things like that. But usually like a brand new garment that's never been created before will take anywhere from like 6 to 12 months or even longer to actually like get out to the store. It takes a long time because of like the fitting, the producing, there's, all sorts of machines that will do knitting now. They'll do the sewing. They actually sewing is still generally a hand practice. So there are, factory floors full of people that will sew things together. Knitting tends to happen on machines. And then it all gets boxed up and then put on a boat and brought over. And then there's a whole other slew of people that move it from the ships to the trucks to the stores, and then it gets to you.
Thank you.
Kind of, I don't know if that all made sense, but I mean, again, like just a lot of it is just, it's changing hands. And that, that a lot for a long time was what I wanted to help people see, was like how many hands actually touch your garment before it actually gets to you. And it's a lot.
I've heard 200 pairs of hands, either 200 pairs of hands or 200 hands. I forget exactly, but that it's like hundreds of people touch each garment before it gets to you.
Yep.
So then how is that $5 t-shirt possible, right?
Exactly.
Like, how does that even make any sense?
No, like, and this goes into this is where the ethics conversation comes in, because not most of those people aren't being compensated, or like, a big problem that gets brought up a lot is the factory floor, and what happens there. A lot of things in the factories, a lot of people in the factories are paid per garment that they sew. And that's what happened with American Apparel is that they call it a sweatshop practice, like, because that's really what it is. Like you're paying someone literally like 5, 6 cents per garment they're able to create in an hour. And so then they rush through it as quickly as they can just to make $1. Like, 5, 6, that means they have to in order to make like $1 a minute, you have to sew 12 garments within a minute to make that $1.
Yeah, which is
which is impossible. Like, so, you're literally like sweating, trying to like get as many out as you can. And that's where this overproduction, that's sort of the practice that has become normalized with all of this overproduction, is like, how do we get things out as fast as possible?
And I remember American Apparel's whole shtick was sweatshop free. Like they always talked about how they, produced in LA and no sweatshop. And I remember thinking like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But then and that's the thing though, is like, the more you have, like, in order to pay people fairly, like obviously things are going to be more expensive. And then that, that again goes into the conversation of accessibility. So these things are all tied together. Like one thing always leads to another. And so it's hard to answer like the one big question without like answering all these little ones. Like, how do we pay people fairly while also keeping these prices so that it can reach, X audience that can't really afford to pay $50 for a t-shirt. And so, there's really no good answers anyway. Unfortunately.
Oh, I get very emotional, thinking about all of these topics, right? And it can feel so overwhelming.
It can, yeah.
Especially when you start to think about, oh, well, but we live in a capitalist society. So, how could we possibly change the way things are done within this system? I am seeing a lot more chatter of people criticizing capitalism though. And,
yeah, that's true.
Trying to re-envision a better system. But obviously that's like a whole different level of.
It is. No. And, it's hard to have these conversations with people that aren't ready to listen or aren't ready to receive the information, because there is a lot of information out there. And, again, like with a lot of these really established practices, like it's hard to be in those rooms and be like, hey, like we could be doing things better, like, but it's going to affect X, Y, and Z, which is usually like your profits, your margins, and like your scalability. And so, it's tough because like I've been in those rooms and a lot of it is like, well, we can't give this up because otherwise it's going to affect this, which is a lot of times, profitability is going to affect how the company, it all trickles down. Right. And so it's hard to have these conversations without sounding like everything is just doom and gloom. It's really not. Like it can be, like, if you like, it's like you said, it can be very overwhelming, but again, like the information is out there, and it's really important to start having these conversations more and more. So I really commend you for that, like for this podcast and being and having these conversations. So
thank you. Yeah. I mean, and I think part of the reason that I'm doing it is because I think one that, talking about it is just helpful for a lot of people, one, to understand kind of what's really happening. But I also hope that it actually leaves people feeling optimistic that, things can improve instead of kind of getting sucked into this black hole of like, everything
again,
sucks.
No, and again, like I'm not saying anyone should give up fashion. Like I'm not. I know you're not. Like we're still like you just, you learn, you listen, and you find ways that feel better for you.
Yeah.
That resonate with you, like whatever practices feel best to you.
So speaking about our love of fashion, I always love a good fashion love story. What's your favorite piece in your closet and what do you love about it?
I'm currently obsessed with Lizzo. And so I actually I got a cat suit from her Yitty collection, and I think that's one of my favorite pieces right now. Like I wear a lot of Yitty.
All right.
Just like anything Lizzo is like, and it all feels great, and I feel great in it. It's all comfortable. I love that it's all very supportive, and so it just I don't have to wear a lot of other things with it, like I don't have to wear a bra with it because it kind of is its own bra, like things like that. So I love pieces like that are very functional and also just like comfortable. Awesome. So I think that's my current obsession right now.
What did you think about the crystal flute?
Oh my God, that was so great. I was like, I can't believe like I was like, I mean, like I didn't know that thing existed. So the fact that it plays was just like, it was so cool.
I've never played the flute extensively, but I have played the flute. I have a flute. I can play it a little bit. I think I would have felt a little terrified just even holding it, let alone trying to play it. But she played it. It was awesome.
Yeah. No, like, and they like brought it out on stage for her and everything. And then like I saw the videos of her going to, was it the Library of Congress or something, and playing it there. Just so cool. So Lizzo's so cool. Like I just like like I said, current obsession.
So what's other than Lizzo? It sounds like Lizzo is really inspiring you, but any other inspiration right now?
Lizzo's been a big one. I don't know, I kind of just go with like I'm really just going with the flow of things. Like right now I'm really high on spooky season. So like Hocus Pocus has been like all over everything. I actually like I put up banners outside that say welcome witches. Like I'm like that's my current mood, is just like Hocus Pocus and like casting spells and things like that. Like I'm all into that right now.
It's like, yeah, it's the season of the witch, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like we just the full moon was yesterday, like the whole thing.
What do you think you're going to do for Halloween this year?
I'm actually doing this there's this bar thing here called The Obscure. It's like it's in, but you have to text them for an invitation, but they're having like a Halloween feast, and so I think I'm going to check that out. And then I have like a friend who's doing it's like a parody show of like Freddy Krueger, The Nightmare on Elm Street. So I'm going to go see him in that. Like I have a lot of little activities like kind of planned and like going up. So we'll see. Like there's a lot of different things happening. I think there's a museum thing happening that I'm going to. I got to check my calendar. I've been signing up for as many things as I can.
Fun.
Yeah.
What do you know what you're going to dress up as?
I have this like skeleton bodysuit that I got that I think I'm just gonna wear around everywhere because it's like iridescent and it's shimmery and it's pretty and like still a little spooky. So that's my vibe.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I remember, before kids, Halloween was kind of what you're describing, right? Just finding cool events and parties and dressing up and just having fun with friends. And now it's all about, where are we trick-or-treating?
Yeah. It's weird. I don't get a lot of trick-or-treaters in my neighborhood. And I was so surprised because I was like, that was part of the reason why I wanted to like move into a house. Because I love like having a bunch of people over and then just like giving out candy and things like that. And so like coming to this house, like as much as I love my house, there's never any trick-or-treaters, and I don't know why. And I kind of miss that part of it, but I don't know, someday.
Yeah, I used to love that too. Yeah, we would have little gatherings and have some friends over and, and fawn over the cute kids and their costumes. And now we have to be the people out. So we don't even give candy because we're not home. We're out.
Yeah, you're taking the kids out.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So what's keeping you feeling optimistic about the future? The world is crazy right now. So much going on.
Really just seeing seeing people just create and do things that resonate and feel good for them. So in terms of the fashion industry, like all of these new designers that are up and coming, and they're, really putting themselves out there, and they're putting out their own messages, like whether it's about sustainability or equitability or equality or whatever. Like I that makes me hopeful more than anything, is just seeing them putting themselves out there, putting out their products, and then seeing other people, I love, this is part of the reason I love TikTok and the TikTok generation, is like being able to share information and in such a quick and easy manner. And being able to expose yourself to all of these creative people who are doing things again, that they love to do and that they want to do. And so I think that more than anything gives me not just hope, but it makes I want to be you when I grow up. This is what I want to do too. So, kind of trying to not take that on myself, but trying to figure out what that practice is for myself as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how can people connect with you and find you?
So I'm on all platforms at Christy of Trees. So Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all those things at Christy of Trees. My show is called Afternoon Equalitea. Tea with the drink. And that you can find on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram as well. And yeah, that's where I am.
Fantastic. And you mentioned before we started recording that you have some exciting stuff coming up. What should we be looking out for?
I don't want to talk about it quite yet.
Okay.
But I'm I have been wanting to I am trying to create a product right now. As I said, what a lot of other people are doing, they're trying to create things that feel good to them, that resonate with them, that I think create a sense of community around, what feels good, what feels best for them. And so, I'm working on a project to try to bring all that together as well, and tie it back into my show again. So, yeah.
Oh, well, I'm so excited to see what it is when it's the right time.
Yeah.
And so much luck to you working on that.
Thank you.
And it's always such a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Yeah. Well, have a beautiful day and have a fabulous spooky season.
You too. And I can't wait to start swapping again.
Yay.
Yay.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Swap Society podcast. Swap Society is an online clothing swap for women and kids that makes it easy and affordable to mix up your wardrobe sustainably. We're a growing community of women across the USA who are creating positive change by swapping our clothes and slowing down our fashion consumption. We would love to swap with you. If you're interested in joining, you can sign up at our website. Learn more at www.swapsociety.co. That's swapsociety.co. You can find the show notes for each episode on our website. Please get in touch with us on social media too. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and YouTube for the video version of this podcast at Swap Society. Music is by Joel Korolitz and yours truly. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Please help us spread the word by subscribing, leaving a rating and review, sharing on social media, or simply telling a friend. We really appreciate your support. Have a wonderful day, and remember to swap before you shop.